It's Angela with Broadhead Memorial Public Library back for another episode of Have You Heard? I think we have 2 days left, today and tomorrow, of Flora and Ulysses by K.D. Camillo with pictures by K.G. Campbell. A quick thank you to Candlewick Press for allowing us to share the story with our readers this summer. All right, so yesterday, wow, a lot has happened to Flora, Ulysses, and everyone in the story in the past day, right? So Flora returned home, got into kind of a fight with her mom. Ulysses typed a list of words on the typewriter, and Flora's parents decided that it would be best for Flora to keep living with her mom. All right, well, let's see what happens next. Chapter 52. Is there a word for that? He sat in the window of Flora's room and looked down at the sleeping Flora and then up and out at the lighted windows of the other houses. He thought about the words he would like to add to his poem. He thought about the music at Dr. Meacham's house, the way the voices sounded singing. He thought about the look on Mr. Klaus's face when he went sailing backwards down the hallway. Was there a word for that? Was there a word for all of those things together? The lighted windows and the music and the terrified, disbelieving look on the cat's face when he was vanquished? The squirrel listened to the wind blowing through the leaves of the trees. He closed his eyes and imagined a giant donut with sprinkles on top of it and cream inside of it. Or jelly, maybe. He thought about flying. He thought about the look on Flora's face when her mother said that life would be easier without her. What was the squirrel supposed to do with all of these thoughts and feelings? Flora let out a small snore. Ulysses opened his eyes. He kept them open until the lights in the windows of the other houses went off one by one and the world went dark, except for a single street light at the end of the block. The street light fizzled into darkness and then flared back to life and then fizzled again. Darkness, light. Darkness, light. What, Ulysses wondered, does the street light want to say? He thought about William Spiver. He thought about the word banished and the word homesick. He imagined typing the words and watching them appear on the paper, letter by letter. Flora had told him before she went to sleep that she thought it would be a good idea if he didn't type anything for a while, at least not on his mother's typewriter. It seemed to provoke her, she thought. I think your typing poems and flying around the kitchen kind of made her have a nervous collapse or something. She had said this, and then she had given him a sad look and closed the door on the bedroom. I closed the door as a reminder, okay? No typewriter. No typing. All right, now we have another short little comic strip. So it says, but what was a closed door to a superhero? And Ulysses starts to fly around the room. He flies out of the room and he flies down the stairs. He flies past the little shepherdess. He gets to the typewriter and he says, it was superhero time. Or something. Chapter 53. A Sign. Flora was dreaming. She was sitting on the bank of a river. William Spiver was sitting beside her. The sun was shining, and a long way off there was a sign, a neon sign. There was a word on the sign, but Flora couldn't read it. What does the sign say? Flora asked. What sign? Said William Spiver. I'm temporarily blind. It was confusing to have William Spiver act just as annoying in a dream as he would in real life. Flora relaxed. She stared at the river. She had never seen anything so bright. If I were an explorer and I discovered this river, I would call it the Incandesto, said Flora. I think of the universe as an accordion, said William Spiver. Flora felt a prick of irritation. "What does that mean?" she said. "Can't you hear it?" asked William Spiver. He tilted his head to one side. He listened. Flora listened too. It sounded as if someone a long way off were playing a toy piano. "Isn't it beautiful?" said William Spiver. "It doesn't sound much like an accordion to me," said Flora. "Oh, Florabelle," said William Spiver, "you're so cynical. Of course it's an accordion." The sign was closer. It had moved somehow. The neon letters were blinking on and off, and on and off, spelling out the words, "Welcome to Blundermeechin." "Wow," said Flora. "What?" said William Spiver. "I can read the sign." "What does it say?" "Welcome to Blundermeechin," said Flora. The piano music got louder. William Spiver took hold of her hand. They sat together on the banks of the Incandesto River, and Flora was perfectly happy. She thought, "I don't feel homesick at all." She thought, "William Spiver is holding my hand." And she thought, "I wonder where Ulysses is." Chapter 54, Dear Flora. All right, Ulysses at the typewriter in another comic strip. Let's see what he has to say. "He will defend the defenseless. He will protect the weak. He will write a poem." The kitchen was dark, lit only by the light above the stove. The squirrel was alone, but he had a strange feeling of not being alone. It was almost as if a cat were watching him. Had Mr. Klaus tracked him down? Was he hiding in the shadows, waiting to exact his revenge? Cat revenge was a terrible thing. Cats never forgot an insult. Never. And to be thrown down a hallway backwards by a squirrel was a terrible insult. Ulysses held himself very still. He put his nose up in the air and sniffed. But he didn't smell cat. He smelled smoke. Flora's mother stepped out of the shadows and into the muted light of the kitchen. "So," she said, "I see you helped yourself to my typewriter again. Put your little squirrel paws all over it." She took another step forward. She put the cigarette in her mouth and reached out with both hands and yanked the paper from the typewriter. The roller screamed in protest. Flora's mother crumpled the poem without looking at it, without reading one word of it, and dropped the paper on the floor. "So," she said. She exhaled a ring of smoke, and the circle floated in the dim light of the kitchen, a beautiful, mysterious O. As he considered the cigarette smoke suspended above him, Ulysses felt a wave of joy and sorrow, both things at once. He loved the world. He loved all of it. Smoke rings and lonely squids and giant donuts and Florabelle Buckman's round head and all the wonderful thoughts inside it. He loved William Spiver and his expanding universe. He loved Mr. George Buckman and his hat and the way he looked when he laughed. He loved Dr. Meacham and her watery eyes and her jelly sandwiches. He loved Tootie, who had called him a poet. He loved the silly little shepherdess. He even loved Mr. Klaus. He loved the world, this world. He didn't want to leave. Flora's mother reached past him and picked up a blank piece of paper and rolled it into the typewriter. "You want to type?" she said. He nodded. He did want to type. He loved typing. "Okay, let's type. You're going to type what I say." But that went against the whole point of typing what someone else said. "Dear Flora," said Flora's mother. Ulysses shook his head. "Dear Flora," said Flora's mother again in a louder, more insistent voice. Ulysses looked up at her. Smoke exited her nostrils in two thin streams. "Do it," she said. Slowly, slowly, the squirrel typed the words, "Dear Flora." And then, stunned into a dumb willingness, he typed every terrible, untrue word that came out of Phyllis Buckman's mouth. The squirrel took dictation. Chapter 55, A Stone Squirrel. When he was finished, Flora's mother stood over his shoulder, reading and nodding and saying, "That's right, that's right. That ought to do it. There are a few misspellings, but then you are a squirrel." Of course you're going to misspell things. She lit another cigarette and leaned against the kitchen table and considered him. I guess it's time, she said. Wait here. I'll be right back. And he did as she said. He waited. She left the kitchen, and he simply sat there unmoving. It was as if she had put a spell on him. It was if typing the lies, the wrong words, had depleted him of an ability to act. Once, long ago, in a garden in springtime, Ulysses had seen a squirrel made of stone, gray, hollow-eyed, frozen. In his stone paws, he held a stone acorn that he would never get to consume. That squirrel was probably in the garden now, still holding that acorn, still waiting. I am a stone squirrel, thought Ulysses. I can't move. He looked over at the words he had typed. There were untrue words. Several of them were misspelled. There was no joy in them, no love. And worst of all, they were words that would hurt Flora. He turned slowly. He sniffed his tail. And as he sniffed, he remembered the words that Flora had shouted at him in the giant donut. Remember who you are! You're Ulysses! This helpful advice had been followed by a single powerful word. Act. He heard the sound of footsteps. What should he do? What action should he take? He should type. He should type a word. But what word? All right, so now he's at the typewriter, and he's able to get an F and an L, and then Flora's mom comes back, and she says, no more typing, and it goes black. All right, let's read another chapter. Chapter 56, Kidnapped. She woke with a start. The house was incredibly dark. So dark that Flora wondered if she had gone temporarily blind. Ulysses, she said. She sat up and stared in the direction of the door. Slowly the rectangular outline of it appeared, and then she could see that it was ajar. Ulysses, she said again. She got out of bed and went down the darkened stairs and past the little shepherdess. Silly lamp, she said. She made her way into the kitchen. It was empty. The typewriter was unmanned. Or unsquirreled. Ulysses, said Flora. She walked over to the typewriter and saw a piece of paper glowing in the white of the dim light. Uh-oh, she said. She leaned in close. She squinted. Dear Flora, I am terribly fond of you, but I hear the call of the wild, and I must return to my natural habitat. Thank you for the macaroni and cheese. Yours, Mr. Squirrel. Mr. Squirrel, call of the wild, terribly fond. It was the biggest lie that Flora had ever read in her life. It didn't look like Ulysses had written it at all. Only at the very end did the truth appear. 2 letters, F and L. That was Ulysses. She knew, trying to type her name one last time, trying to tell her that he loved her. I love you too, she whispered to the paper. And then she looked around the kitchen. What kind of cynic was she, whispering, I love you, to a squirrel who wasn't even there? But she did love him. She loved his whiskers. She loved his words. She loved his happiness, his little head, his determined heart, his nutty breath. She loved how beautiful he looked when he flew. She felt her heart seize up. Why hadn't she told him that? She should have said those words to him. But it didn't matter now. What mattered was finding him. Flora hadn't been reading The Criminal Element for 2 solid years for nothing. She knew what was going on. The squirrel had been kidnapped by her mother. She took a deep breath. She considered what to do, what action to take. In the event of a true and genuine emergency, an absolute and undeniable crime, the authorities must be notified immediately, said The Criminal Element. Flora was certain that this was true and genuine, was a true and genuine emergency, an absolute and undeniable crime. Still, it didn't seem like a good idea to notify the authorities. If she called the police, what would she say? My mother kidnapped my squirrel? The Criminal Element. If for some reason the authorities are not accessible to you, then you must seek help in other quarters. Whom do you trust? Whom do you know to be a safe port in the storm? Flora suddenly remembered her dream. How warm William Spiver's hand had felt on her own. She blushed. Whom did she trust? Good grief. She trusted William Spiver. Chapter 57. Tootie to the Rescue. It was 2:20 a.m. The grass was heavy with dew. Flora was picking her way through the darkness. She was breathing heavily because she was carrying Mary Ann in her arms, and Mary Ann, for all of her pink cheeks and delicate features, was excessively silly frilliness, was incredibly heavy. Talk about stout, thought Flora. In the criminal element, it said, "Can one reason with a criminal?" This is debatable, but it is true that the rules of nursery school are often in good effect in the criminal world. What do we mean by this? We mean that if the criminal has something you want, then you must have something he wants. Only then is it possible for some kind of discussion to begin. There was nothing and no one that Flora's mother loved more than that lamp. Together, Flora and William Spiver would find her mother. They would offer to exchange the little shepherdess for the squirrel, and then all would be well, or something. It was Flora's plan. But first she had to find William Spiver, and she didn't think it would be a good idea to ring Tootie's doorbell at 2:20 in the morning. "William Spiver?" said Flora. Here she was, standing in the dark, holding an unlit lamp and hoping that a temporarily blind boy would hear her call his name and come to the rescue of her and her squirrel. A squirrel who, for a superhero, sure did seem to need a lot of rescuing. Things were pretty grim. "William Spiver?" she said again. "William Spiver?" And then, without really intending to, she started saying William Spiver's name over and over, louder and louder. "William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver." There was no way he would be able to hear her, of course. She knew that, but she couldn't make herself stop. She just stupidly, idiotically, hopefully kept saying his name. "Florabelle? William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver? Florabelle? William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, Florabelle!" There he was, standing at the darkened window, conjured, apparently, by her need and her desperation, and her words. William Spiver, or at least the shadow of William Spiver. "Oh," said Flora, "hello." "Yes, hello to you too," said William Spiver. "How lovely of you to visit in the middle of the night." "There's been an emergency," said Flora. "Right," said William Spiver. "Just let me put on my bathrobe." Flora felt a familiar prick of irritation. "It's an emergency, William Spiver. There's no time to waste. Forget about your bathrobe." "I'll just put on my bathrobe," said William Spiver, as if she hadn't said anything at all, "and I'll be right there, wherever there is." It is shockingly difficult to locate even the most obvious things when one is temporarily blind. The world is very hard to navigate when you can't see. Although, to be perfectly frank, I had trouble navigating the world even before the advent of the blindness. I've never been what you would call coordinated or spatially intelligent. It's not even that I bump into things. It's more that things leap out of nowhere and bump into me. My mother said that this is because I live in my head as opposed to living in the world. But I ask you, don't we all live in our heads? Where else could we possibly exist? Our brains are the universe. Don't you think that's true, Florabelle? "I said it's an emergency!" "Well then, I'll just put on my bathrobe and we'll sort it all out." Flora put Mary Ann down on the ground. She looked around wildly in the darkness. What was she looking for? She didn't know. Maybe a stick that she could use to hit William Spiver over the head? "Florabelle?" "Ulysses is gone!" she screamed. "My mother kidnapped him. I think my mother is possessed. I think she might hurt him." "Do not cry," she told herself. "Do not cry. Do not hope. Do not cry. Just observe." "Shh," said William Spiver. "It's okay, Florabelle. I'll help you. We'll find him." And then the light in William Spiver's room came on, and Tootie said, "What in the world are you doing, William?" "Looking for my bathrobe." "Tootie to the rescue." The words appeared above Tootie's head in a neon kind of brightness. Tootie, shouted Florabelle. It's an emergency. My mother has kidnapped the squirrel. Flora? Said Tootie. She stuck her head out the window. Why do you have that awful lamp? It's complicated, said Flora. Again with the lamp? Said William Spiver. What in the world is the meaning of that lamp? My mother loves the lamp, said Flora. I'm holding it hostage. Desperate times call for desperate measures, said Tootie. That's right, said Flora. It's an emergency. I'll just get my purse, said Tootie. All right, well, I think we will stop there for the day. I think we have just one more day left to figure out what happens with Flora and Ulysses, to see if they can rescue Ulysses or if Ulysses rescues them. And if you have been participating in our summer reading program, you can go ahead and write down 20 minutes of listening time today, and we will see you tomorrow. All right, have a great day. Bye.